are listening to WRKE 100.3 LP.FM Salem, streaming live online at WRKE.org and on the TuneIn app. Just search for WRKE. Now on to the LP.M Music Showcase with me, Nico. And for today, like I promised last week, I would talk more about Japanese music, and specifically about, for this session, Yellow Magic Orchestra, either also known as YMO, and their album Solid State Survivor. Now, I don't know if many people here listen to J-pop, I guess as it's called, or 80s city pop, because it went through a reoccurrence later around like 2017 because of people like Mariya Takeuchi's music coming back on YouTube and being put through the algorithm and recommendations. So that just sort of popped up. So I wanted to talk about the people who were not only influential to that genre, but just to electronic and EDM music in general. And that is, as I mentioned, the Yellow Magic Orchestra. So I will be playing the first song, and then I will get right back to it when the song is, well, finished. Here we go. Not yet. Okay, so before I go on, I just want to talk about some activities that are happening around campus this week. So, from February 17 to February 22, excuse me, I don't know how to turn that off. The Modern Languages movie showing is from that date. So the Department of Modern Languages is hosting a movie night. Come to the Wortman Ballroom this Tuesday at 7 p.m. to watch the Italian movie Umberto D. This showing will be followed by a panel discussion. No tickets or registration are required, but if you have questions, contact Dr. Teresa Hancock Palmer at hancock@roanoke.edu. And now back onto the LP.M Music Showcase. So hello. So some things are probably going to change. For one thing, this broadcast will go on until 6:58 because I did not know that I actually had to end 2 minutes beforehand. So I've been doing this for like 7 times, and I was just never told. It wasn't their fault. I probably should have asked, but now I know. So that's why I may have started a little bit earlier, or at least on time, because I'm going to get as much as I can out of the way. But we are here to talk about Solid State Survivor and YMO. So the band Yellow Magic Orchestra was formed in 1978 by Haruomi Hosono, who was on bass, keyboards, and vocals. And actually on this song, what you heard was actually his vocals modified through electronics. Yukihiro Takahashi, who was on the drums and lead vocals. And the man himself, Ryuichi Sakamoto, on keyboards and vocals. These guys are a powerhouse. And later on, all of these guys went on to produce, I think, for other artists during this J-pop 80s era, and then just cement themselves later on. And as I mentioned before, they are very influential in electronic music. You can hear it from their first album how maybe some things sound cheesy or dated, but for the time it was very forward-thinking. I think they were some of the only groups in music during that time who would have their instruments be mostly, if not fully, made up of electronic programming, because they used things like drum machines, samplers, and sequencers. They used it heavily, and this was in 1979. During this time, they were still using tape because recording digitally onto computers was around 1983. And actually, one of Billy Joel's albums, The Nylon Curtain, which came out during that time, was one of the first to be mastered and produced almost digitally. So you can see how during this time they were just sort of working what they really had on them. But at the same time, it's amazing how they were just able to get this out even with what they were limited to. So I will further explain onto just what they were doing by talking about the next song. By playing the next song, Absolute Ego Dance. Here we go. Thinking back to it, I think not only was this influential during music during this time, but I think also very expensive, because if I remember correctly, a lot of synthesizers back then weren't very affordable, and especially from here until the 1980s, I believe. Like when Kate Bush released her album Hounds of Love, she used a synthesizer that I believe cost around $10,000. Wow. And can you believe it? One of my favorites, Stevie Wonder, bought 3 of them. Yeah, because I think it was during that time. I don't know if they used it on here, but it was the sort of thing where each sampler and each sound effect was used and put in a floppy disk and then inserted into the computer, and then that would translate into the keyboard itself. So very cool trivia. Now, as I mentioned, they pretty much this whole album, aside from most of the drums, are electronic. And you can see how they're just trying to figure out what could work and where. It's very, very commendable that even now the melodies and the tempo and the beats and everything still stand out, or they still stand the test of time even after all, 40 years. Because during the era of when people would start to experiment with or create new genres, you can see how maybe there would be it would be in its infant phase in which things could sound groundbreaking, but then when you look back on it, maybe say a drum pattern was kind of cheesy, or maybe that's just that some sounds just don't translate well because they could have sounded I guess cheaper than what's usually expected nowadays. But I guess from instruments and things made in the 70s, a lot of stuff still holds out very well. And another one of my favorites, which is coming up, Rydeen, is another great example of that. So here it is. I think in some way Japanese music during the 80s was what influenced a lot of pop in Asia. Because I'm thinking back to when I was younger. I'm Filipino, and my parents listened to a lot of records and a lot of musicians during that time, and a lot of what they and a lot of it sounded similar to this. So I'm just thinking maybe it emerged from this. It could very well be, or I could be reaching it. It probably emerged from the emerging neo soul and R&B movement of the 90s in America. Either way, that doesn't take away from the fact that they're very influential. They've been sampled. They've been sampled a lot in hip hop. And not only that, when they first emerged and when their sound came out, they likened it to like Beatlemania, but in Japan. It was that strong. And I think I looked into some articles and just how their style and everything still holds up, and it's just influenced Japanese culture so much. So, as you can see, for 1978, these guys were very forward-thinking, and you can see it. I'm looking at a list of influences that they had, or what they stated. And again, Japanese electronic music during that time was a basis for it, and taken from chords and changes in traditional Japanese music, in Chinese music, Indian music, and Bollywood. They took it from arcade game samples. They took it from rap, exotica, Caribbean ska, disco, the Beatles, and the Beach Boys, especially Brian Wilson, who maybe I will talk about for Pet Sounds. Maybe. But it just goes to show, and I think that Sakamoto himself has expressed that when making music, there is no border between music and noise. So there's just this happy middle ground that you have to find, or else it'll be too much. But in this case, they hit the ground running, and it's amazing. So the next song is called Castalia. So the next song is called Behind the Mask, and if it sounds familiar, then you might know it because it was covered by Michael Jackson and Eric Clapton. Michael Jackson actually heard the song, I don't know who from, I think Quincy Jones, and he liked it so much that he remixed it and he wrote some lyrics to it. And that actually was supposed to go on Thriller, the best-selling album of all time, Thriller. But at the last second, it was scrapped, and he later released it as a single, like much later on. And Eric Clapton took he took Michael's version with the lyrics and covered it, and that became a top 10 hit. So yeah, this song is pretty well known, I think. But it was the first song from YMO that was released in America as a single, and when they played it, it was a sort of song that they wrote in 5 hours and didn't really think about, but everybody started dancing and they didn't really know why. But still, it's a very, very impressive song. So here it is, Behind the Mask. Oh, before I get into that, I actually wanted to talk about Castalia because I love the droning electronic instrumentals and the piano. And also, remember when I said that a majority of the instruments aside from the drums are electronic? Yeah, I forgot about the piano. But anyway, you didn't hear it from me. Behind the Mask. The next song is Day Tripper, a classic Beatles song. They mostly took it from Otis Redding's version of it, though, and reinterpreted it and made it more electronic. Now, with all this talk about the Beatles, maybe some of you are thinking, are you going to cover the Beatles? And my answer is probably not, because I know pretty much all of their albums are very well known and dissected. And I wanted to do this series going into some that might not be very well known. I know Rumors is pretty well known, but I mean that the Beatles themselves and just their history has been dissected back and forth. So I think it wouldn't really be right on just, spitting out what's already been said by people 10, 20 different times. But nevertheless, here's Day Tripper.
She was a day tripper.
That's so beautiful and expressive. That song was called Insomnia. And I just want to just point out and compliment just how immediately the vibe can switch because of the introduction of an instrumental. How I forgot the name of that instrument. I'm sorry. How they introduced that in the second half, and how it just sort of washes back and forth. And also to Day Tripper, because they also introduced the overwhelming amount of electronic sound, as well as the breakdown in which they will suddenly start and stop, and it's just great composition work. They're very I keep saying forward thinking, but it's just insane how they were able to essentially almost decide, oh, I'll do this and do this from almost no reference except for just maybe a niche of electronic music. But this is the title track and a very great ender. It's Solid State Survivor. So that was Yellow Magic Orchestra. They went on to release further studio albums together, and then they broke up around the 90s. And occasionally they will still meet back around just for tours or just little reunion shows and all that, but that doesn't change the fact that they are still very influential in Japanese culture, Japanese music, and electronic music in general after all this time. And that influence, as I mentioned before, spreads to city pop, which is the 80s pop of Japan, or I guess what they used to call new music during that time. And it did take a little bit of a more mellower approach, because some of the contributors, aside from YMO, are Tatsuro Yamashita, who, if many of you are well known, is known as the king of city pop. And he is also the husband of Mariya Takeuchi, whose music I will play next, and which sparked that song specifically sparked a new wave of people back in 2017 to listen to just city pop, 80s pop, Japanese pop, new music, whatever you want to call it. So here it is. It's such a great song. Mariya Takeuchi's Plastic Love.
終わ
Isn't that great stuff? So I may not have a lot of time, but I just want to play one more song. I will say that I don't have any idea what I'm going to be playing next week. That will be a surprise for me too. So I'm going to end it with one more city pop song. Thank you all for watching, and if you do like this, you can just look up city pop or any Japanese pop during the 80s, and a lot of music like this will come up. So we will end it off with Midnight Pretenders by Tomoko Aran, who actually was sampled by The Weeknd for his new album Dawn FM on the song Out of Time. So here it is. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next week.